back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. It's me, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show. As you recall, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. And you can access all of our archives at our Just Energy Radio website. That's www.justenergyradio.com. So we've spent the first hour talking to Michele Avanti. Her website is astrologyandmore.com. And she does do, I'll put this out here now, she does do private consultations with people. We'll find out how she does them, whether it's by phone or email or a combination of the two. But as you can tell, she's great. So that's something you could put in the back of your mind. Find out how your personal year for 2012 is going to be. But I guess I should get her back on the air so we can keep talking. Hey, Michele, how's it going?
Oh, it's great. It's great. I mean, we're in the most interesting time ever in the history of the world, in my opinion. Of course, I don't know. I shouldn't say 65,000 years ago was also very interesting, so I won't say absolutely the most, but it is incredibly interesting time. We're coming to a culmination.
65,000 years ago. I'm going, all right, let's see. What was going on 65,000 years ago? Not anything I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, well, that's, most people don't have those records. At any rate, that would be another long story, so... This period of time where we're in, of course, has been focused on by the Mayan and has been focused also by, I believe, some of the prophecies even of the Church, so the Catholic Church. So we've got a lot of things going on, and the Hopi also focused this time frame because it's the time of the rainbow people. So we will enter the fifth world, as the Hopi call it, and we are also, as the Mayans called it, it's the end of time. So very interesting statements when we look at what has probably caused the greatest conflict on this planet, the greatest pain on this planet. It always comes back to issues of money. Money seems to be what makes those in control continue to control. When we create war takes funding. Funding means money. Money, the people who have the money loan the money, therefore they make more money. If you've noticed what's been happening over the last, last 6 years, I guess it's been, we have had a huge change in the way that our money makes money for us, those of us who simply have a savings account.
It doesn't. What are you talking about?
Exactly. It doesn't. 6 years ago, we were getting some kind of 5% interest. Today, you're lucky if you get 1% interest, which, of course, doesn't even keep up with the inflationary process. So you're simply losing money. So if you keep the little green guys in the bank, it's not making you anything.
I have to tell you, Michele, I went to the bank. This was almost 2 years ago, and on the counter, they had a piece of paper, and it said something to the effect of, open up a savings account and you can get 1.5% interest. And I held the paper up to the teller and I said, you've got to be kidding me. And she goes, no. I go, I would be embarrassed to leave this paper here. She just kind of shrugged. She was like, yeah, but I don't have a choice.
So the thing is, those who are in control of the money are the ones who are making the money. And we have allowed them to have control. And, Benjamin Franklin and our founding fathers said there should never be a central bank. Never. Do not allow such a thing. Our Constitution calls for the states to create their own money. We have a lot of things in place that were supposed to be followed. But then the cabal, we'll call them the cabal because it's just a nice, easy word to use. We could call them a lot of things, but... got together and they decided they were going to take over America, and this was the time of Woodrow Wilson, And they created the Federal Reserve Bank, and there were a lot of independent bankers who said, we don't want that. It's against our Constitution. We absolutely don't want that. And what ended up happening was those bankers ended up getting on the Titanic, and it sunk. So there was no opposition to the Federal Reserve Bank, and they pushed it through, a typical push-through. You can look at the date.
For real, they got on the Titanic?
Yeah, for real. For real, that's actually a true story. I could go into a long thing on that, but...
No, you don't have to. I'm like, I guess they didn't have, like, that fast-acting cancer stuff, or...
No, they just put them on the ship that could not sink, and I can't remember who man was in charge of it right now, but if you think about the man who actually was the main push for the creation of the Federal Reserve, I don't know if it was actually a Rothschild. I think they used a front man, but he was supposed to meet with them, but he never made it to the boat. He didn't get on the ship. The rest of them were on there. And there were people with guns on the ship who made sure those people did not get in any of those boats. There were not enough of those boats. Why were there not enough of those boats? You can ask a lot of questions. But that was determined that they would sink that ship. So,
I mean, I just think it's kind of like, okay, so the Titanic was one giant conspiracy. Wow. Okay, a new one to put in the brain.
Yeah, well, when you look at the key events that have happened over time, you can almost invariably see that there is some kind of connection to the money. There's always a connection. It's a huge, let's unravel the mystery. At any rate, it was on December the 23rd, 1913, at 6:02 p.m., that the Federal Reserve Bank was formed. Almost all the things that have been passed without proper ratification in this country have been passed around Christmas, when everybody is at home or away from that Congress. And they never have enough people to ratify it, and yet they get it through. Always fascinating. At any rate, Woodrow Wilson's life was also challenged, and that's why when people say to me, well, what do you think about, Barack Obama said he'd do this and said he'd do that, and how come he hasn't done that? And I just say, once you become president, you're owned. Your children are being watched. And all they have to do is tell you, your daughter will be whacked. And if you were in that position, what would you do? So it's not the presidency we should be concerned about as people in this nation. It's the House of Congress, because that is where we have our voice, but we have not allowed it. We have not allowed ourselves to have a voice. We have played their game, and it's up to the American people, if they want a revolution, to stop playing that game, to create their own completely independent group, their own independent party, something separate from the Republican and Democrat, because it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. Those are controlled parties. Only the American people have to stand up and say, we can do this, we can do it ourselves. And through social networking, they actually could. They could blindside this election and put people in place themselves who can't be bribed. But I don't know if they're going to do it. I'm curious what happens. At any rate,
let's go back to the Federal Reserve.
Yes, when we take a look at the Federal Reserve, it was right now the way that the activity is taking place. Saturn has been going through the fourth house, so there's been a lot of, I want to say, a lot of holding back. And when you look at them, that's exactly what they've been doing. They have been holding back. They've been holding back information. They've been holding back emotions. They've been staying kind of clear of being seen. Do we see a destruction or a change or a major event taking place? This chart, when it was given birth, it's a chart where the Sun and Pluto are in opposition to each other. So it tells us right off the bat that there was an enormous struggle between the president and the formation of this group, this bank. It also tells us that struggle will never stop. When we have hard aspects to that particular struggle, which is active at this time with Neptune, issues of the illusion or the truth are challenging this bank. We need more than that to make it work, make the challenge be such that it will actually bring clarity to the American people. We have Pluto at 8 degrees in Capricorn. We have Uranus at 8 degrees in Aries taking place on June the 6th. You can make a note that the beginning of June is going to be a very volatile time all over the world. Not only will Jupiter be headed into Taurus, but you have Uranus and Pluto squaring each other. Pluto is transformation. It's explosive. It's huge explosions that can be anything from destruction of a government to destruction of a mountain volcanically. Uranus says, sudden fire. I challenge you with sudden fire or sudden revolution. So this square is enormous, and it is happening this year. And when Jupiter gets on into Gemini, it activates the square in an even more key way. But for this Federal Reserve Bank, this square is also active on the progressed sun of the Federal Reserve. So there is going to be some major challenges to this reserve this year. We've had lots of people talking about it, but we've not seen anything explosive happen with it. It's always been in the background, and people are just ranting, and they look like they're ranting about it because they're so angry, and the ones who make it to the screen are people who are just ranting. And when we see somebody ranting, we don't give it any validity, which is unfortunate because that person in that state of rage had to get there somehow. But we've been trained that if a person doesn't talk to us in a calm, quiet voice, that we shouldn't even listen. That's our training. Interesting.
But there has been talk, and I'll figure you don't have a chart for this, about the World Bank, which you kind of don't really hear about, and that, they're filtering money into that bank so that they can set up this whole global economy, which would supersede the Federal Reserve.
And I do not have a chart for that, unfortunately.
That's because it's a secret World Bank.
Yeah, will supersede this? I don't know that it will. It will be very interesting to see what happens, because I took this chart all the way to 2020, and at 2020, this is where this chart really looks like it will fall apart. If I were to say, if you had to ask me, when do I see the Federal Reserve perhaps being dismantled, I would say probably in 2020, which, of course, is a long ways beyond 2012, where everybody thinks the world's going to end. But I'd say it looks to me like it's in the year 2020.
But based on how it seems like these groups run their timelines, for them, it's really not that far down the road.
Exactly. That is exactly true. But we have to see if the people of the world can get fired up enough that they dismantle it themselves. You see, the people of the world could disconnect from the bank. They don't have to let this continue. They could create their own entity. I don't know.
But there are so many people that are tied up with their belief in credit cards. I mean, it's interesting because there are a lot of people that have become big proponents of debt-free, which makes it so that you don't have to have a reliance on the bank.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have credit, so you're not part of that whole. Well, I need new living room furniture, so I'll just charge it up, and they live in this perpetual debt, so you're perpetually owned.
Well, what's really interesting is we were just talking about the 1.5% interest you can make on your savings account, while the credit card companies are making upwards of, if you have a very good credit card, you might get one for 9%. but the majority of them out there are over 28%. They're into spaces what we call usury. Some of them are even at 30%, which is absolutely beyond ridiculous because it's not just a one-time fee, it's an accruing fee.
Come on, don't bounce a check or overdraw your bank account because that's $35. That's like your 1.5% for like the rest of your life to make that little bit of money back.
Exactly, you'll never make it back. So what is available to the people who are not realizing what's available to them is we have the ability to be bankers to each other. Now, if I said to you, well, I've saved some money and you're going to do something, you're going to expand your business, all right, why don't I give you some of my money and I will take 10%. Well, 10%, I've just increased my income tremendously by taking 10%. And this individual is getting a loan at a much lower rate than they can get it from any bank anywhere in this country or around the world. What people don't realize is we have the ability to loan to each other. We have the ability to form things within our states that loan to each other. We have the ability to make our states the strong, independent spaces that they were originally constructed to be by the Founding Fathers, and still have a nation because we'd still be feeding tax money into the government. However, if we don't understand where that money is going, we should stop feeding it and we should change our government. We need a revolution in this country, and we're standing on the doorway of it. I don't know all the answers. I'm not that brilliant. But there are people who are brilliant. And if we could access the brilliance of the American people, we could change this nation.
Well, I think, there's a couple of things that need to continue happening, but it's like you just watch it happen before your eyes. Like they just passed that new law, another new law, that says that they can detain you without charge for indefinite periods of time, for whatever.
By allowing that law to pass, and this had to be enormous pressure on Barack Obama. It had to be some enormous pressure. This man was a constitutional teacher. He taught the Constitution, a professor of law, and he has just signed off on this piece of legislation that gives away your rights to habeas corpus, one of your most basic rights. Habeas corpus, for those who don't understand it, is your right for your family to find you when you are put in a prison and to know what charges have been put up against you, so that habeas corpus means present the body so they can see that you're still alive, and then they can expeditiously move this lawsuit forward to find out what is the issue, how do we defend you, and how do you defend yourself. But we've just given away all those rights because there is no more habeas corpus. There is no right to privacy of papers or privacy of the home. There is no more right to expeditious trial.
So anyway, share the David Wilcox story because I think, all right, this is how I found. So for people that aren't familiar with David Wilcox, he speaks on a lot of different topics, from conspiracy theories to UFOs to physics-y kind of topics to consciousness. I mean, I don't have his website in front of me, but if you look it up, David Wilcox, you'll find him. He does a lot of radio interviews, and he's been on like the Ancient Aliens TV series several times. And I found out about what was going on with him on Facebook, my best news source sometimes, because there had been death threats made against him because of what he had uncovered, and he wanted to go on record. So Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot interviewed him so that it was on record and it was out in the public what he had found, because there had been death threats made to him if he continued his investigation. So with that said, I'm going to give it to you, Michele.
Okay. Well,
because it goes along with the Federal Reserve thing, and it sounds like you're more familiar with the details of it than I am.
Well, his website, for those who want to know it, is divinecosmos.com. And where he got this information is from a very, very good source. The man's name is Benjamin Fulford. Benjamin Fulford used to be an editor for one of the biggest business magazines in the world. And when Benjamin Fulford came across, he has worked with the Asian Pacific Bureau. He was bureau chief for Forbes magazine. He is a man who is fluent in Chinese, fluent in Japanese. He's fluent in a lot of Asian languages. He's a very intelligent man and a very, I want to say, a normal human being, okay, who just happens to be an investigative reporter and who has found a lot of information about what is going on behind the scenes with the monetary flow. As a result of him getting ready to tell a story, to give a piece to Forbes magazine about the economy and the cabal behind the economy, the old world order as he calls it, they told him that they would not print it, and that if he were to tell anyone else about it, that they would fire him. And so he became no longer associated with Forbes magazine. He has connections with every financial minister across the Asian borders, from China to Japan, Singapore. It goes on and on. All of those nations, he has connections with all of those people. He has connections with the companies and corporations that work there. He has a lot of information, and he ended up when David Wilcox came across this unbelievable piece of information where the Italian government arrested 2 Japanese men who were carrying what appeared to be forged documents, or the government said they looked like they were forged documents, for over $1 trillion worth of United States bonds. These bonds were dated most of them, I think, were dated 1934. These bonds, in their value, would be in the trillions of dollars. And the Italian government apprehended these people at the Swiss border. And there is a photograph on David's site, and I think I put it on Facebook as well, the photograph, of these documents. This is the only picture, because after this picture was taken, all the other pictures have obviously been destroyed, because this should be the biggest scandal on every piece of news network around the world. But there is only one picture. What this all connects to is, why would anyone want to forfeit or sell or counterfeit or try to sell trillions of dollars worth of American bonds? Because there appears to be a collapse taking place. And if your bonds are not worth anything, if you can at least sell them and get something out of them, you'll be ahead before it falls to the very bottom. And this is a very clear statement that the monetary situation in the United States of America has been propped up for a long, long time. The connections with these bonds, when you read the story, it's more than, it reads like James Bond. And there's an old saying that if it sounds absolutely unbelievable, it probably is true.
Well, and isn't there a lawsuit pending with this whole thing as well?
There is, absolutely. It's filed in one of the districts in New York, not New York State, but in New York City. In one of the Manhattan districts, it's filed. And on it, the people who are on that that are listed include the President of the United Nations, Berlusconi, who is the Prime Minister of Italy, there are a list of people on there. I think President Obama is on the list as well. The list is, it reads like you're going, are you serious? These are people who they are trying to sue over these bonds? Fascinating. But what for the average person is, you need to really take a look at where you are monetarily, because this is a very clear statement that we are at a point where there is another gold grab going on, and at the end of this gold grab, things are going to collapse. When you look at the monetary situation around the world, during the period we've been in, gold and silver had been dropping. I don't know if you watch the gold or silver market. Precious metals are very much connected to the monetary marketplace. When precious metals skyrocket, it usually is indicative that money that we have printed is not valuable anymore.
But hasn't gold and silver dropped recently? Like it was going high, and then it just dropped
exactly
again.
My point. That's very connected to this whole experience right here. Why is gold and silver dropping? And it's not. I think it's on its way back up now. I think it's headed back up. But they dropped it so that they could buy it. You control the marketplace. You grab what you can grab, and the best. Then you can.
Here, we'll just put it on sale.
Well, you know, it's really interesting. Jon Stewart recently did a show, and my jaws just dropped as I watched him. You know, he can make such a joke out of things that are so incredibly serious. He said, well, I just discovered, he says, that the Federal Reserve has a discount window. I'd like to go to the discount window. You have to be a big wig or a big corporation to be able to go to it. And they were giving money away at the discount window. You could have the money, and you didn't have to have any interest on it at all. And then what were the people doing with the money? What were these big corporations that were able to take the money from the Federal Reserve at 0% interest? They were taking that money, and then they were buying U.S. bonds from the Federal Reserve at 3%. So they would make 3% on the money that they had borrowed for no percent.
And we wonder why we're screwed up. But it's just those games that are being played that just blow your mind.
Yeah, you go, you must have it wrong, Michelle. No, I don't have it wrong. But is that window available to you or me? Oh, don't be ridiculous. But also, if you or I have a not sufficient funds check for $5, we're going to pay $30 to the bank for having that. Whereas someone in a big corporation loses $1 billion, he just apologizes.
We got hit with $75 worth of bank charges for a frickin' cup of coffee.
What?
Because they, on a debit card, they did not say, oh, not enough funds. They went and let him buy the stupid cup of coffee, and a bunch of stuff bounced because of a cup of coffee, $75. It was a very expensive cup of coffee. Any thoughts on gold and silver? You know, I think it's interesting. There are all those commercials on TV. It's like, sell your gold, sell your gold. Do you think that's a good idea? And what are your thoughts about even buying gold and silver as a long-term investment?
You know, I would say if you don't have silver or gold in your possession, and I'm saying in your possession, I would go get some. Because historically, and I won't only say gold and silver because I am going to add some things to that, so don't take that as my ultimate statement. Because historically, the only thing that allowed people to survive and buy food in hyperinflation was having gold or silver. You and I don't remember, but I even have a client from Austria who was there in World War II. And he said he actually witnessed people with wheelbarrows filled with money, Austrian paper money, going in to be able to buy milk. But the silver which today you can buy for the spot price of silver today is somewhere around $27, $28, which means you can buy it probably for $32 to $34 an ounce. Would be worth, should that hyperinflation take place, and we are certainly in a position for it, that little ounce of silver you can buy today for $30 will most likely be worth closer to $500. You look at places where there have been hyperinflation. There was hyperinflation back, in the 80s in Argentina. And when you went in the grocery store, the milk when you walked in might have been $3. By the time you got to the counter, it was $15. We can't really fathom this because we've never seen it or witnessed it. But it is not fiction. It is stuff that has actually happened around the world.
Well, and Jim Mars has been talking about it for the last year or so, about that possibility, especially when we talk about the European Union and, the issues in Greece and Italy and Portugal about their financial system, just being propped up with our money. Yes, guys, our money.
Hysterical. Our money that is not worth very much compared to the euro and is sinking faster every day. But, it is such a confusing and tangled issue, money. But I will say this. If you can't imagine doing this with silver, and I say in your possession because you can buy silver stocks, and if you buy silver stocks, they can be taken from you. Paper can be taken from you, and paper can also become valueless. It's not like you can take your paper stocks and go into the grocery store. There could come a time, though, where you can take your little ounce of silver and go into the grocery store, and someone will take that and give you food. But if you don't want to go down that road, and I would never, ever suggest that anyone store their silver or gold in a safety deposit box, because back in the time of Roosevelt, they removed all the gold and silver, unless it were just ancient coins, old coins. Any silver or gold bullion was removed from all the safety deposit boxes and given to the government.
Okay, and they didn't consider
everyone.
That theft.
I think that was 1938, actually. So, but there are other things that you can think about. You can think about, what about food? Are there foods that I could keep and store and be able to use to barter to get other foods? I believe you could.
Well, like beans or tuna, things. I mean, obviously things that are canned are going to have a long shelf life, And
I think that people will pay very, very high prices for luxury items. When I say luxury items, I'm talking about things like cocoa or tobacco. There are things, when you think about things that could be luxury items, you'll find that there are certain ones. And people will still want to celebrate someone's birthday, and if there is no money or no food easily available, they're going to go searching for it. They're going to go searching for the things that make you remember the good times. It's very interesting how the human psyche works.
So when you look at the charts that are going out in time, I mean, do you see it really getting that bad? I mean, is there that kind of possibility out there?
That possibility exists, but remember, the consciousness of man has the ability to change it, to soften it, and we have been doing that. We have been doing a very, very good job of softening the volcanic eruptions, softening the earthquakes, and softening the issues of monetary collapse. I believe we're having help from beings from other planets who are all around this planet right now, working diligently to keep it as balanced and keep it as much in the light as it moves through the galactic center as can be done. We are part of an ecosystem of a much larger space that goes beyond this solar system. To have this planet blow up, which we have the capability to destroy this planet, And in the history of time, there have been other planets that have been destroyed. If you look at Mars, Mars was once a thriving culture. It no longer exists as a thriving culture. So they're not going to let that happen here. They're going to do everything in their power, and that's why we are seated here. So many beings of light, we are actually part of the DNA of those ETs. We carry their DNA, and that is why they can be here to help. I know it's getting way out there, but you know what? This is a year where way out there is probably going to get closer than ever before.
Well, and I think people's consciousness can handle it. They say, when Orson Welles played War of the Worlds, everybody freaked out and they thought, we were being attacked. But I think people's consciousness now have been so exposed to ideas of conspiracy theories or ideas of extraterrestrial lives or aliens that, if it all came clean, they might not like it. But I think most people would be like, that explains a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think it's coming to that point with this particular combination of Jupiter and Uranus and also Neptune coming into activity here. I think we're coming to a revelation, and I think it's for the good of the people. Unfortunately, there are those who cling to their religious pathways and will not be able to figure out how to fit that together, and that could be very disturbing to them. I just want you to know that if anyone in your audience is tightly connected to a religious pathway that claims that, God will reappear at this point in time, or
Michelle, I don't think any of those people would listen to this show.
Well, that's good. I do want them to know that they will come to an understanding that will work for them. Just take the information that comes in and say, God or Spirit or Christ or Buddha or whomever you want to speak to say, explain this to me. Give me time to assimilate this so I understand how this works. And if you do that, instead of getting angry or fear-ridden, you will find that you will come into a place of peace and knowledge. And that's the most important thing for all of us at this time. When I talk about revolution, I talk about the monetary system collapsing, I don't want anyone to go into a space of fear, because by doing that, you give your power to that collapse. You give your power to difficult experiences, and you actually open up a doorway to bring those kinds of experiences into your world. What we're trying to do is to take the higher road of these experiences, which are Uranus and Jupiter, have the ability to bring us a breakthrough to a new state of awareness, a revolution in our awareness, so that we can see the truth and move through the truth to a new world that we create.
But it seems like the last few years we have just been battered with fear-based mentality. And I think people are really starting to take a step back and go, it doesn't have to be this way.
They are, and that's the cue. That's what we want you to do, because this battering of fear is part of what the Kabbal's last choice is. We've drugged them, we've oppressed them, we've held them back in every way we can, and yet they seem to be waking up. What are we doing wrong? Let's pour more fear out there. And they do have a variety of ways of pouring fear onto the planet. They use a lot of waves that are thought waves. They are man-made types of thought waves to permeate the planet. And if you do not surround yourself with love and light each day and practice loving you and loving all of the world and practice visualizing peace, you'll find that at different times you get affected by those waves, and you find yourself going into a space where you're afraid. And hopefully your awareness comes back. And if it doesn't come back, then you need to assign an angel and say, I need an angel to kick my awareness back whenever I start to lose ground. So they will. You are surrounded by angels. We all are. And they have the ability to give us information if we will just tell them we want it. So cue them in. Make sure they're actively participating in your world so that the issues of fear that are being promulgated through the airwaves are not affecting you.
Yeah. I'm looking at the clock. We have, I'm going to say 15 minutes, but it's really not. It's more like 13 minutes. And I want to just touch, that's why I didn't leave a whole lot of time, because I want to come back to this in a totally different show. But, you know, this is an election year, and, you know, I had you on the last election, which was a fascinating show, and I want to do the same thing, and hopefully Deborah won't have kidney stones at that time, and we can get her on too. But do you have any little maybe preview information about the election, which obviously we'll get to in much more detail once we get a little more clarity around who the final candidates are going to be?
Well, you know, I have done the charts for all of the known candidates, and when we look at the charts and we look at their interfacing with the United States chart, we look at their charts in terms of their progressions and the transits towards the election, at the time of the election, we look at the election itself. There's only one of any of these Republican candidates that we're looking at that can even overcome the chart or compete with the chart of Barack Obama. And that person is not being highlighted at this time because he's under a serious Saturn-Uranus transit that is not allowing him to gain any momentum and has caused him to lose face publicly in many ways, even though he does it in a very gentlemanly manner, much like Ronald Reagan used to. He smiles, and that's Rick Perry.
See, and that is just weird.
Yeah, well, he's the only chart that has that ability. All the other candidates will fail. They will not be able to become president unless there is some manipulation of the process that astrologically cannot be seen. Rick Perry's
and that
chart,
never happens in our country.
Well, Rick Perry's
so not even like Ron Paul? I mean, there's a lot of people that really
just doesn't
appreciate him.
Yes, I even appreciate Ron Paul, and I live in a state that if any state could get Ron Paul, you know, if our state had any power to get him elected, we probably could do that here in the state of Oregon, but because he is very well loved throughout this state. But he doesn't really have the activation of the U.S. chart or a chart that can really compete with Barack Obama's chart. You know, when we look at a race, I don't care what kind of race it is, it doesn't matter. There are certain things that you look for as an astrologer that say this is going to be a winning chart. Whether it's a horse race, a dog race, a wrestling match, a tennis match, doesn't matter. You're looking at those two charts and seeing what magnetics are in that moment where that match will activate. What does each person bring to it? And nobody else can bring what Obama brings. And Obama has an interesting fixed star in his chart, too. It's with Pluto, and that fixed star is called Thuban. And Thuban is holding on to power. And it's almost like if you can see a dragon's claw just holding something. It's holding on to power. And I'll throw a couple of other very interesting little notes out there. When I was looking, because Rick Perry's chart really looks better than Barack Obama's chart to me. I hate to tell you that. I hate to tell anybody that, but it's true. Will it be an absolute? Are there any absolutes? No. There are, number one, there are no absolutes. This is not a race where I can say absolutely. In the past, there have been times where I have said absolutely, because when we looked at the last election, nobody's chart could even compete with Barack Obama's chart. And so there was no question in my mind. I said that if he would become candidate, he would win the election. and then they entered Sarah Palin into the race, and I was able to say at that moment that her chart had a wonderful ability to ignite the American people, but even with that, I knew that the Saturnian elements would eventually overtake her chart very shortly and then make her kind of drop like a stone from view. And that's exactly what happened. When we look at these charts, however, they're too powerful to be able to say one will definitely overcome the other. But if you said your life depends on it, you must bet, then I would be more likely betting on Perry. But I will say this. I'll say that when I looked also at the situation of elections and inaugurations, I looked in terms of Mercury retrograde because President Obama was inaugurated during a Mercury retrograde period. And I was curious to see if Mercury retrograde had played a part in the election process of other presidents, in the re-election process of other presidents. And when I looked, all the one-term presidents, Carter, Johnson, Truman, had no Mercury retrograde signatures. So we could absolutely say that the odds of a re-election are better because of the Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde says we will repeat this action. That's what it says. And he was inaugurated in it, so there's a statement that we could repeat the inauguration action. When we look also at this period in time where this next election takes place, I believe it is in a Mercury retrograde. So we have another statement. So I will say this. There are some really powerful statements that could pull through, but it's an unknown. I think you need to look to see if Rick Perry is brought forward sometime at the end of January. They're going to, from looking at his chart, I'm going to say that the powers that be, those who provided money for his campaign in the past, are going to be talking to him early in January, around the 8th or so of January, and I think they're going to, dust him off and bring him back out, and we're going to see a new Rick Perry. When I look at June, I see his chart rising, and so we'll just have to see. It's a developing thing. If he does not come back into play, then and no new candidate comes into play, then I'm going to say Barack Obama will be reelected, despite everything.
Hey, what about Jesse Ventura?
I have not looked at Jesse Ventura's chart. I know I did many years ago, but I have not looked at it. But you know what? If he comes into play, we'll take a look. Maybe he has something. I know he has certainly a Uranian nature, so I know he can ignite the people. But I think he probably also puts some of the people in this country off. So sometimes we can be too radical.
It would be pretty cool, though.
Well, the problem is that unless we change our House of Representatives and our Senate and put people in there who are a voice of the people, it really doesn't matter who president is.
Yes, exactly. I mean, even your comment about Obama being a constitutionalist, and then he got in power, and it was like he's gotten rid of it.
Yeah,
much.
He's been manipulated. You cannot tell me that man who believed in the United States Constitution, who taught the United States Constitution, would just step on it, stomp it, and burn it up like that. We're talking about an attorney. Habeas corpus is like the basis of being an attorney. You wouldn't need attorneys if everybody could just be picked up and thrown in prison and never be brought back and never brought to trial. Why would we need any attorneys? We would just have a military coup. We'd have the military just throwing people into Guantanamo, anybody who protests. That is basically what goes on in China.
Well, wait a minute. That's what they're working on.
Exactly. That is what they're working on. You don't speak up. Anyone who does not speak up is in agreement. It is a statement of agreement that what is going on is fine. So or
else your next mailing address might be FEMA camp number 345, Iowa.
I don't think they'll give you an address. But I'm pretty old, and I don't think there's, I've had my life threatened in the past, but I'm pretty old, and, I don't really have that much to lose. So, and I don't really have that much in terms of, it's not like I have this huge following and I'm not out there aggressively doing something. I'm not on the top of their list. Unfortunately, David Wilcox is young, and he has a huge following of over 100,000 people will hit his website at any one time. He has received a death threat that would be a real one, but one of the splintering factions of the cabal, who is now positioning themselves to reveal everything, stepped up and said, "We will protect you," and they are protecting him.
Where did you hear that piece? That's a new one to me.
Oh, it's right there. It's all in that information right there. You need to read that whole article. It takes a long time to read it. It is not short by any means. If you go to DivineCosmos.com to his podcast, which I have posted actually on Facebook, it will take a while for this whole thing to come up, and it will take you a long time before you can read through this whole thing. It's huge. But he explains everything in here.
Well, see, and I think when I read it, it was prior to that happening, because this was just hot. When because this was a couple of weeks ago.
He has everything in here. He talks about the Rothschild buildup of Japan and how they sent the Japanese in to steal gold from China, and how China made a deal with the United States and loaded up that gold on 3 battleships and sent it to the U.S. in exchange for these bonds, which have reappeared in Italy, some of those bonds. Those bonds are worth a fortune. Of course, what are they really worth? He explains so much in here. He explains the Titanic in here and how 600 people were killed on the Titanic. He explains a lot of information here. And I believe that he is not only being protected by the splintering of the cabals, because that's who's protecting Benjamin Fulford, or he would be dead also, because he knows way too much. But this splintering factor is what is protecting these people, but I think there's also a much more powerful protection, and it is an ET protection. I think the ETs are being welcomed here. And we are moving into a space where they are going to protect their own, and they actually have always protected their own. I know I have had protection from ETs in the past.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, Michele, because we have 1 minute a minute and a half before the music comes up. And as I was saying when we came back from the break, that you do session work, and if people want to get a chart, their year ahead, can you just kind of share with people that part?
Yeah, you can always connect with me on Facebook under facebook.com, Michele, Michele, 1L, Avanti, Avanti. You can go to my blog, which actually has a tab for consultations, and that's Astrology and More, ANDMORE.blogspot.com. You can go to astrologyandmore.com, and right there you'll see links to my blogs, or you can call me, 541-863-6631.
Excellent. Michele, it is always so much fun to have you on the show, and I'm already got in my mind that election show when it gets closer, but it's way still far out to pull that together.
Yeah, I think when we get to June, I think we really have a better view. When we get to June, after Jupiter goes into Gemini, I think there's going to be a lot of good shows that you're going to do. So.
There are always good shows that I do. They just,
I know they are. You have some very remarkable people on your shows.
Like you. I mean, I just think that you're a, excuse my French, kick-ass astrologer. So, for everybody listening, if you're thinking about getting a chart, she rocks, don't you think? So
I appreciate your appraisal of me. That's wonderful. And I'm always honored when you invite me.
I love you. But there's the music, which means I got to go. So I'll talk to you next year, Michele.
Happy New Year.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's Michele Avanti. Her website is astrologyandmore.com. Next year, we're going to be speaking to Fiona Broom, The Paranormal Patterns of Ghosts, and Cash Peters about John of God. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio. Point your browser to www.justenergyradio.com for more show information and to contact Dr. Rita.